Hi guys, I'm back. Thank you for joining me again. Um, I got a lot of good topics that I'm going to touch on and we'll have a lot of fun with, throwing around some ideas and stuff. But first, I thought that I would tell my story. I watched a lot of these the other day on YouTube, just, people's story of addiction and recovery. And some of them were really inspiring. Um, I'll do it in, a couple parts so that, I don't overload you in one day. It's hard to know where to start. I guess I'm going to start what started it all. In 2012, September 1st, we had our third child, our baby boy, Alan Henry Gardner. And 17 days after that, he passed away. So I'll have to tell that whole story later on as well in a different video. But he passed away, and needless to say, me and his father had a very hard time coping with it. We didn't cope with it. Our answer was to start, using drugs. It numbed it, and that was the only thing I could even think to do. I just wanted to lay in bed and die, but we couldn't. We had to get up. We had other kids. We had family, checking on us. So, it wasn't a bright idea, but that was our idea. And so we used perks, and of course, it doesn't take long, maybe what 3 or 4 days of using them in a row to become addicted or dependent. So it was whatever we can get our hands on. Opanas, perks, Oxy 80s, Vicodin, anything. I would go to ERs, different ERs all in one day. I would go to dentists, and we would always get our hands on them. Soon it started to become harder and harder to get our hands on them, and harder and harder to afford them. So one day, one of our friends was like, well, you can try this stuff, this dope, and it's, heroin, but one bag is like 4 perks. It's amazing. And immediately, I was like, no, no way. That's for junkies. That's for losers. Like, we take perks. We're not losers. So I talked myself into it because what other choice did I have at the time? I wasn't going to be sick. God forbid we, as addicts, let ourselves be a little uncomfortable. So that wasn't going to happen. So I agreed, and we did it. And at first I thought, okay, well, we're just sniffing it, so no big deal. You know, as long as we're not putting needles in our arm, then we're fine. And I justified it, and me myself think that was okay. Um, and that went on for a couple months until, wasn't getting me as high as I wanted it. It is literally chasing the dragon. Like you want that first high that you had, and I wasn't getting it. So um, I asked someone to shoot me up, and they did. And of course, I fell in love with it immediately. And we went on with that until, pawning all of our jewelry, pawning everything in the house, computers, TVs, cars, everything until, there was nothing left to pawn. I was stealing things from family members, constantly every day asking my grandmother for money. And I think she kind of knew something bad was going on, but I don't think she knew exactly what it was. One day I went over to ask her for money, and my mom was standing there with a drug test in her hand. And she said, we know something's going on, and you're not leaving here without taking this. And of course, I, screamed about it, and no, I'm not doing this. You're crazy. I'm 30 something years old. You're not the boss of me anymore. And then finally I was like, you know what? They already know. She's standing here with the urine test, a, a drug test. She knows. So I went and I took it, and my mom looked at it, and immediately tears came to her eyes, and I just lowered my head. I felt like the biggest piece of shit. I felt like, you know, there's no coming back from this. There's no redeeming myself from this. And my grandmother said, what was it? And pills. And my mom said, no, it's worse, Mom. It's heroin. And then my grandmother started crying. I remember that. And it was just awful. So after that, the house that we were living in, um, me and my fiance, the house that we were living in was my grandmother's house that she owned. Um, that she let us, live in. We paid her rent or whatever, but, we were renting from her. So, needless to say, after that, she wanted us out. She, took us and kicked my husband out and kicked me out and took me and said, we're sending you to rehab or whatever. And um, it's all such a blur, like the rehabs. I remember I must have went to at least 5 or 6 of them, back and forth. And I just couldn't get it. I would get out, I remember, and I would have it for maybe a few days, and I just couldn't get it. And, so I'd run away, and my mom would find me and bring me back, and I'd go back to rehab. And um, now that I look back at it, I know I just wasn't ready. I wasn't letting myself get clean. I wasn't even trying, really. I told everyone I was, and I wanted everyone to co-sign my bullshit, but I wasn't even trying. So I was homeless. I had nowhere to stay. Basically, if I wasn't in rehab, they weren't going to give me a place to stay. I was homeless, and I'm trying to remember first. There were 2 different times in my life that I was homeless. I'm trying to remember uh, what the first one was. I think, okay, and one of the worst things, you know, was seeing how much I was hurting my kids. I knew I was hurting them, and it's not that I didn't care, but nothing mattered as much as heroin. Heroin was my first love, my only love, and that was it. I'll never forget, tucking my son in and tucking my daughter in, and knowing I was leaving that night. I was going to run, and knowing, this might be the last time I tucked them in. I could OD, I could, get beaten and killed or whatever. But I didn't care. I tucked them in and I left, and went on a run. I was in a very dangerous city, and I made some friends that, one of them was a drug dealer, and he had a bunch of girls living at the house with them. Didn't take me long to realize, he was a pimp, and those were his prostitutes. So, again, something I said I would never do, gung-ho, no way, that's for losers, that's for junkies. But I had to make money. I had to do my drugs. I had to. Rehab wasn't working. The family sure as hell wasn't giving me any more money. I had to do something. So I jumped into the wonderful world of prostitution. Not a good thing to say. Not a good thing to remember, but, like I said, if this could just help one person, one girl, one woman, one man even, from not going down this road, that would be great. That would be, a godsend. So I did that for a while. I was jumping in and out of cars all day, every day. It was just a painful existence. That's all. Nothing. It was a blur, but I just remember being in so much pain. I'd jump out of a car and I'd be like, okay, I have enough to get my drugs, and I couldn't get there fast enough because I would start to get sober, and I did not want to be sober. Because when I was sober, I could remember what a piece of shit I was. When I was sober, my kids flooded my memories and my brain, and I didn't want to think about them. I didn't want to think about my old life, and I didn't want to think about my fiance, and I didn't want to think about what could be or what was going to be. I didn't want to think about my son that died. Nothing. So I could not get to the drug dealer fast enough. At this point, I was shooting dope, and I was shooting coke, and smoking crack. Mostly shooting dope and smoking crack. The 2 went hand in hand. I had to have both of them. I couldn't be too tired, so I had to smoke crack. And then I had to shoot the dope just to not be sick and to bring me down a little bit. So, jumping in and out of cars. One day, the guy that we were living with was driving around out past his curfew, so probation and parole pulled him over. And while they were, interrogating him on the side of the road, they sent probation and parole into his house, like SWAT. I remember they handcuffed us. There were 12 girls in there about. They were going in the ceilings, hitting the ceilings with brooms, and drugs were falling down, and scales were falling down, and we're all just like, oh, this is not good. Um, a lot of them got let go because they didn't have warrants. And then when it came to me, he ran my name and he said, you have 12 of them, 12 failure to appears. And they were for dumb stuff like seatbelt fines or whatever, but I was getting high. I wasn't going to go to court. He was like, look, I can't let you go. You have 12 of them, obviously. Went to jail. And in Delaware, there is no county jail, There's only state prisons, so you go right to state. So this is my first time in jail. I'm terrified. It's awful. Jail is just like one of the most depressing places ever. Then on top of that, you're sick because you don't have your drug. But what's even worse, after you're done being sick, you start getting emotionally sick because, you don't have your drugs to numb you. And you start thinking about your kids, and you start thinking about everything that you've been through, and you start thinking about the disgusting men that, that you slept with, and let you touch, and you touch it. It's horrible. You want to kill yourself. I somehow made it through jail. I think I did about 3 weeks, and I was able to plead time served or whatever. So they let me go, and my grandparents had come to pick me up. I didn't know this, that they were there. If I had known it, I wouldn't have left. I would have went with them. I'm not saying I wouldn't have went back to the streets right after, they picked me up. But I didn't know. There was no one there, so I left, and I walked. And I started walking right up the street, and the jail's in the city. So I see it right in front of me, my city. And I'm just overjoyed. So I walk down there, and I'm asking around, and most of the girls that I knew were in jail, already. And I thought, oh, well, that's weird, everyone that I lived with or had ran with or had, they weren't there. 2 of them had OD'd by then, which was crazy, and one of them was murdered. They found her body down on the tracks. So I started running again, and found someone else to couch surf on their couch, back and forth. The guy who was letting us stay with him, the drug dealer, pimp, he was, he was in jail, I heard, for life because he was a habitual offender, so he wasn't getting out. So once again, I had nowhere to go. I hung out with this girl, Stacy, that I really liked. She was a sweetheart, but she was a crackhead. But she taught me different ways to kind of stay alive. Kind of, we slept in staircases, and we took turns sleeping. This night she's going to sleep, and the next night I'm going to sleep, and but we really didn't sleep. We just smoked crack and did dope all day, and jumped in and out of cars. And once again, I fell right into this existence. And then one day, I was with this taxi driver, and he said, yeah, he was up from Philadelphia, from that way, and I was down in Wilmington, and he said, yeah, he was talking about all the girls up there on the streets, and I was like, you know what, drop me off up there, because I'm thinking the drugs are better, So I left Wilmington, and I went up to, I didn't go all the way up to Philadelphia. I went to Chester, which is bad. It's a bad city. It's not a good place. But I do the same thing. I couch surf there, and up there, it's hard to find crack. Um, People have coke and they cook it up. So, so I did that, but I didn't know how to do it. So I would get it, and then I'm like, you know what? I'll just shoot it. So that's when my love affair with shooting the coke began. I was shooting dope and shooting coke, and you know, it it took it took a toll on my body and my mind, and it was awful. Trying to think if I'm leaving anything out. I know I'm leaving a ton of stuff out, but one of the things I remember that happened to me in Chester was there was a customer um, who didn't have a car, and right away I get a bad feeling because I'm like, you're gonna walk up to a prostitute, and I don't know, it just felt weird, but I needed the money, so he was like, let's go. There's this abandoned house behind the store. And I was like, okay. So I follow him up there, not thinking anything of it. And it's really dark. And he holds my hand because he's trying to guide me up these steps. And there's trash all over the place. Like you're stepping on. It's like an abandoned hoarder house. It was horrible. It stunk. It was disgusting. He's like, let's go upstairs. And I said, okay. So, I follow him upstairs. And I felt like I walked into it. As soon as I got like to the top of the stairs and like turned to go to, there was light in this one room, so I figured we were going into this room, and it felt like I just walked into his fist. He just jawed me, hit me so hard. I thought, I know, I heard bells ringing. It was awful. I fell, and I was on my hands and knees, and I started to get up, and he kicked me in the side, and he said, stay down there, stay down there. And sorry. It's hard to remember. It's hard to talk about. But he said, stay down there, and he raped me. He raped me. And took my purse. And right after he raped me, he said, stay down. And I said, don't take my purse. There's nothing in there. Like, there's no money in there. Just please leave it. It's all I have. I have my social security card, my license. It's all I had. Just dumb stuff, my needles. And he told me shut the fuck up, and he kicked me again, right in the shoulder blade area, I remember. And it was just like, I thought for sure. I was like, he broke something. I know he broke something. It was just like the worst pain ever. And he left, and his second he left, I was crying. My shirt was ripped. I was bleeding everywhere, and I just ran down, and the first person I saw was, just some guy on the street that, crackhead, that I just knew. And I was crying, and I said, he raped me, the guy raped me. And he said, we gotta call the cops so we can get you to the hospital. And I said, no, why? I'm just another hooker that got raped. They're not gonna care. They're not gonna find him. They're not even gonna look for him. And on top of it, I didn't feel like doing that. I needed to get more money because I was sober again. And now I had just another thing on top of it to make me feel like shit. Um, so it was crazy. I'm bleeding out of my nose. My clothes are ripped, and I didn't care. I just wanted to get back in someone's car so I can hurry up and get some money so I can go get some drugs so I didn't have to feel like me anymore. So I can get out of my skin. And he said, all right, I'll go in my sister's house and get you a t-shirt. And he did, and I got right back in the car and did my thing. Got my money and got my drugs. And but a lot of the stuff I did was a blur that day. It will always stick with me because I'm lucky. You heard a lot about girls, ending up on the train tracks dead. And I was in that abandoned house. No one would have found me, you know. no one would have found me for a while. And I just think, like, my daughter and my son would have had to grow up, and eventually they would know the truth that their mom was found in an abandoned house, you know, with their pants around her ankles. And, you know, it hurts that I put myself in that position, but it hurts even more that I put them in that position and my fiance in that position. That wasn't enough for me. That wasn't my bottom, you know. Unfortunately, there's a lot more that happened, and I'm gonna take a break, and please comment, and please subscribe, hit the little bell for the notifications, because I'm gonna have a follow-up video and I'm gonna tell you the second half to my story. And I promise you it's interesting, so please join me. Thank you guys so much. I hope that, you know, I hope we do good things here, and I will see you guys. Have a good week.